In this lesson, we are going to be talking about the importance of time in your memoir. So once you have defined the point or the question or the argument you're making, the idea that's at the heart of your memoir, it's time to set some boundaries around that so that you know exactly what the slice of life is that you are writing about. Time is really important here because you are only telling that slice, and it's really easy for your backstory to creep or to keep writing the story right up to the present moment if you don't have those firm boundaries of time around the story that you want to tell. Time is also going to impact your perspective as a narrator. Are you writing this as the child experiencing these events in real time, or as the wise elder looking back on the story with the lessons already assimilated or the meaning made of those experiences? That decision is going to impact the way the story is told. Now, some of these ideas are going to feel a little bit conceptual and they might be hard for you to grasp at this point. And as you start into the writing of your book, it will become clearer. But having a good sense at the outset of the story you want to tell and the time period will really help you to plan your book and make sure that it doesn't just creep into a 700-page memoir that you don't really want to write and no one wants to read. So keeping it to the point is important. So the first question is, where does your story start in time? It's important to be clear on where the journey begins. Otherwise, as I say, that backstory could go right back to childhood. So I want you to take a moment now, pause this video just for a few seconds, and identify the scene that's at the beginning of your journey. That doesn't necessarily mean it's at the beginning of the book, but where did this journey start? What's the beginning point for you? Take a moment and note that down, and we will come to some examples later, but just for now, what's the first step that happened on this journey you're about to tell us about? Okay, now that you've got your beginning point, we need to look at where the story ends. Now, the end is going to be determined by the point that you're making, sort of resolution of that argument, or when the question is answered, when you've come to the new understanding or the realization that the story is told. So that point will determine the end of your book. So when you think about what that scene might be, are you standing somewhere and you get a letter and that answers the question? That might be a bit simplistic. If you think about the books we discussed in the previous lesson around the Salt Path or Wild, they had a natural conclusion at the end of those journeys because that was the conclusion of that story. It could have gone on. They could have gone on to the point 20 years hence when the book came out, in the case of Wild, or 10 years hence it might be. But no, it didn't. It stopped when she finished the trial and she got to the end of the markers, and the reader was left wondering, what happened after that? The Salt Path concluded when they reached the end of that pathway. She's gone on to write subsequent memoirs that tell the story of what happened next. In Animal, Vegetable and Miracle, it was a story of 1 year. So we get to the end of the year, that's the natural conclusion of the year, of the book, of the story. So although those ones had like either a temporal or a geographical, well, sort of both, wasn't it? Reaching the end of the path, reaching the end of the year, there's also a sense of resolution at that point because that was the journey they embarked upon, and so that brought it to a natural conclusion. So what's the scene at the end of your story? And if you don't have a logical progression like that, an easy ending, then it's when did you get to the understanding or the realization that you had accomplished something or you knew something different? What was the outcome at that point when you realized that was the end of the transformation or the journey that you'd been through? Pause this video now and write down where you think, what the event is, what the scene is, where your memoir ends, where your story ends. Another important matter to consider is where you are standing in time. Now, this can be a little bit tricky to grasp, but what we are trying to get a sense of is whether you are in real time experiencing these events, not knowing what's going to happen next. So you are moving with the story as it is unfolding, telling events in real time. Or if it's the older, wiser you who is looking back with wisdom and understanding that comes with some distance and perspective from the events. So in Wild, where Cheryl Strayed is talking about her journey walking the Pacific Coast Trail, she didn't actually write that book until she got to 10 years after she'd finished the trail. So was she going to write the story as the young woman walking along the path with events unfolding? Or was she going to write it looking back on the time that I walked the Pacific Coast Trail? That's a decision that she had to make. If you're writing about an incident that changed the course of your life, say an accident or a time you got lost in the wilderness or an earthquake, are you writing as the, say, 21-year-old that experienced that in real time, unsure what's going to happen next, or the 50-year-old reflecting on that? This might be tricky to grasp at first, so don't worry, just try to get a sense of who is the you that is telling the story, okay? And this is something we can work on together if you are struggling. So pause this video and jot down where you think you are in time. Are you in real time? Are you looking back? Are you looking back from, say, middle age? Or if you're 80 now, are you looking back from that point of view? Where's your perspective on the story? Now, one important thing that we need to understand with memoir is it's about seeing yourself as a character who went on a journey. We talked before about how this book is about you, but also not about you. So this is where memoir and a novel can start to overlap, because you are essentially a character who has experienced a transformation. The you at the end of the book, or the you now, is not the same person as the you at the beginning of the book. So in the course of the journey you will tell in your memoir, you have experienced some transformation. Maybe you've fallen in love. Maybe you've overcome some loss. Maybe you've tackled an obstacle that you never thought you'd be able to overcome. That's your transformation. That is your journey, your, what we might call your arc of change. You started out here and you ended up there. And over the course of the book, you go through an arc of change. You go through a transformation. And so one event leads to another event, leads to another event. Maybe there's a setback. Maybe you step forward again, up, down, and then we get to the end of the journey. Now, when you're looking at your own life, it can be really hard to see that arc of change. It can be really hard to see how one event leads to another event, leads to another event, leads to another. Because in life, it's really straightforward, and we often don't see the patterns until we look back. But that transformation, what you experience as the character in your own life, how you have changed, what you have learned, that is the basis of your plot. So what we're going to do now is we're going to sketch out your plot. This is what I call your basic plot. This is an idea that was inspired by my Author Accelerator training, and it's about essentially dumbing your plot down to the most basic elements. If you were to say really simply, what happened? So once upon a time there was a person, and then either every day this was happening, and then one day this happened, or just one day this happened. And because of that, this happened. Because of that, this happened. Until finally she experienced this, and ever since then, this is what her life looks like. Now, this formula may not exactly work for you. You might want to adjust it slightly. But what I want you to do is stop this video now, take 10 minutes, and plot your story in this kind of a way. I was this is how things were, and then this happened, and because of that, this, because of that, this, because of that, this, until this, and since then, this. Use that kind of a structure to tell your story in the most simplistic, basic way you possibly can. So pause this video now, set the timer for 10 minutes, and if you find that helpful, and just plot this out. And you can reflect on this on your walk, or it might take you a few days to kind of actually get this rhythm right, but just take 10 minutes now to give it a go and get that plot on the page. So once you've got your basic plot, you can reflect on it, come back to it, think about it on your walk, think about the things that were the key events that shifted you forward on your arc of change. And then what I want you to start doing is to brainstorm your scenes. Okay, so what we want to then be doing, and this will not be an exercise that you'll complete all in one go. Well, it might be. You'd be amazing if you did. But again, it's something that you'll come back to. So I want you just to start jotting down all the kind of pivotal scenes that you want to tell in this book, the important moments that you'd like to cover. I find it helpful to set a timer to do this, give myself 10 minutes and just go for it. Write down as many as I can. You can do this in all sorts of ways. You could do it, just do it in a list in your journal. You could use post-it notes. Some people find that really helpful, to just scribble things on post-it notes, stick it up on a blank wall. Or you could use an online whiteboarding tool that I'm going to share with you shortly if you want to do it that way. Whatever way you do it, you should have it in a form that you can come back to it and keep adding, changing, moving things around and so on. Any scenes, any lessons, any stories that you want to tell that support your argument, that move you forward on that arc of change, that transformation from the you at the beginning of the memoir to the you at the end of the memoir. It doesn't have to be conclusive right now. It's just as many as you can think of. And you might need to think about points that you got to really low points in the journey, where you thought you were never going to make it, where you thought that it was all over. And then what pulled you out of that? Meeting someone, reading a book. I'm making this up, of course, but we want to be capturing those moments. I hit my low point here, and then I pulled myself out this way. This is the thing that inspired me. I met this person. They really helped me. I discovered this. It really helped me. Trying that first time was really difficult. All those kinds of moments, we jot those out, just brainstorm them on post-it notes, on an online whiteboard Miro, or on your journal. So set a timer for 10 minutes and do that now. If you want to have a look at Miro, you'll find that information in your Notion board. So once you've got your scenes, we are going to look at putting them onto a timeline. And so that might be a case of just moving your post-it notes around on the wall, but I am going to attempt to show you this little Miro timeline. I've set up a little video which will be in your Notion board as to how to use this if this is what you want to do. So what you can do is you can create these little sticky notes here using that little icon button there. What you can do is brainstorm all your scenes onto little notes there. You can change them by color if you want to, and you can drag and drop. Okay, and you can hook up lines like that from one to another. So what I've done here is I've created this timeline, and the little video I've created will show you how to do this for yourself. But I've created this timeline for the salt path, not with everything on it, but just as an example. So the salt path, the opening scene, she is hiding under the stairs in her house. Now, to recap what the salt path is about, it's a couple who lost their home through a legal case that they thought they were going to win, but they lost it, and then the bank foreclosed on their home, and they had to move out. They had to give away their animals, put everything in storage. It was their home of 20 plus years. And at the same time, or within 5 days of that hearing, so the realization they'd lost the house, he's diagnosed with a serious degenerative neurological condition. And he's basically losing his mobility and will continue to do so. So they've lost everything. And so the opening of the book, the beginning of the story, sorry, not the opening of the book, the beginning of the story is she is hiding under the stairs. The bailiffs are banging on the door trying to take possession of the house. And so they've lost the house, and she finds this book while she's hiding under the stairs, pretending she's not home. She sees this book about the Southwest Coast Path, which she calls the Salt Path. I think it's called 500 Mile Walkies or something like that in the book. And she decides, hey, let's do that. It's just like this crazy moment, hiding under the stairs, pretending it's not happening. And she sees this book and she has no idea what to do next. So she decides to embark on this crazy journey. So that's the beginning of the story. And then the end of the story is when they finish the salt path. They finish the Southwest Coast Path, which goes from North Devon to Poole in Dorset, so right around the southwest coast of England. And um, they've sort of come to the end of that part of their journey. What happens next is for the following book. But they've got this sort of new understanding of themselves, new understanding of what they're capable of. They know they can survive on very little. They know they can overcome all sorts of prejudices and other difficult experiences, and new possibilities for their future are now opening up. So that's the journey. That's the arc from hiding under the stairs, lost, confused, desperate, in despair, to actually this renewed sense of what's capable for them, both emotionally but also physically, because his health improves incredibly on the journey. That's not a spoiler because they tell that quite close to the beginning, but they suddenly discover that actually walking, being in the salt air, physical activity helps to keep him well. And so it wasn't a crazy decision to walk. It actually turned out to be an inspired decision for improving his longevity and his quality of life. So they start under the stairs, they end in this sort of triumph at the end of the path, doing something that was bigger than they ever thought possible. So then what happens along the way? Well, they have to tell the backstory of the legal battle, how that happened, how much loved the farm was, and what it's costing them to leave it. That's all really told in almost in real time, because she's not going back to when they bought the farm. She's just reflecting on moments with their kids at the farm and what the old half-blind sheep means to them, that they have to rehome and all these things. Then here's another event, is the diagnosis. So a few days later, when they find out that actually that difficulty he'd been having with his arm is actually something far more serious. First day on the trail, there's an incident where they're treated quite badly in a cafe. They soon discover the prejudice of being homeless, actually, because they are homeless, and so they become treated differently by people. So that starts to happen. So those are the sorts of pivotal moments. Also, there are moments where people show their own privilege and like, why don't you just pay for it? And they've got no money, that kind of thing. Or a time when there's a moment where she drops £2 and it rolls away down the street, and some kid picks it up, takes it off to buy an ice cream, and they're just devastated. That young child, it was, I found £2, but for them, it was actually, the 2-minute noodles they were going to eat for the next 48 hours. So those kinds of moments is what you'd be dropping in as important things. Now, at one point, they go on a beach and they have this, they're in a storm, and the tide is coming in. They're in quite a difficult situation, and they have to move the tent, pick everything up, and run up the beach in the storm in the middle of the night. And Moth, who's her husband, is out there in his underpants, running up the beach with, I don't know if it's the tent or the backpack over his head. And in that moment, she sees him and she's like, but hang on, he couldn't run. He could hardly walk 5 weeks ago. And now look at him. Look, where has this come from? And it's this realization that he's so much stronger and capable of so much more since they started this crazy walk. So that's a really pivotal moment of seeing that through all this adversity and this crazy challenge, it's actually having an amazing impact. Now, that moment happens here in time, but she uses that as the prologue. It's the very opening scene of the book before they're hiding under the stairs. So it's like a flash forward that's told as the prologue. Don't worry about that for yourself now unless that's really obvious to you, because often those things reveal themselves in the writing, if that's the right thing for your story, for the book that you're writing. So don't worry about deciding what's the prologue. I'm just illustrating that where the story begins, hiding under the stairs, may not be where the book begins. That's all. So that's what we're going to be doing. It's a big piece of work, and it will be a work in progress. So I just want you to get started on that, and we'll keep coming back to that as we need to. So either doing it on a whiteboard or a blank wall in your room or office if you've got that ability, or something like this, an online tool where you can continue to edit it, means that you can keep coming back to it as and when you need to. So that is something I would be keen for you to do. Okay, that's your exercise. Go to it and let me know if you have any questions.